Hello, coaches! Welcome back to Coach Better Spotlight. Today, we're sharing another episode in our bonus series about emergency school closures due to COVID-19 or the coronavirus. As requested in our last call, today's conversation features heads of school and school leaders from around Asia, Europe, and the Middle East to get a school leader perspective on these ongoing closures. We had school leaders in all different stages of the closure process: 6 weeks closed, 2 weeks closed, and preparing to close. We talked about the key learnings school leaders have uncovered in their experience and planning, as well as recommendations for schools currently preparing to close. Because this conversation was so insightful, we're sharing the full episode here in video form and on our podcast channel. Watch or listen to the previous episodes to see where this all started and keep up with new posts and resources on our resource page, which I will link here. And you can find all the links to subscribe to the podcast or our YouTube channel on our website, COACHBETTER.tv. All right, welcome back to a bonus episode of the Coach Better podcast. Clint and I are super excited to be here with school leaders from all around the world talking about emergency closures in their specific context and what they've learned, where they're at, and some advice that they might give for other school leaders around the world as well. To get us started, welcome, and thank you everyone for being on the call. I was saying today to someone else that when we planned this call last week, things were crazy. And now that we're having this call this week, things are even more crazy. So really appreciate your time and willingness to share your experiences with everyone. To kick us off, I would like to ask everyone to introduce themselves, say your name and your current role and the school that you're at. And I'm going to start with Katrina because you are first on my list. Katrina, welcome.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for inviting us to share our experience. I'm Katrina Moran. I'm the head of school at Saigon South International School, and we are in our 6th week of students being out of school. And so it is, our teachers have been on campus, so it's not complete school closure, but we've been running a virtual school for this, our 6th week.
Thank you.
And having said that, I'll just say that Vietnam itself, actually, we've only had shouldn't say only, we've had 31 cases and 16 have already recovered. So our government has been very proactive about the measure that it's taking to ensure our safety.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I see Liz next on my screen, so I'm going to ask Liz to jump in.
Hi, I'm Liz Andrews. I'm a secondary school principal at Yokohama International School. And we feel like we're baby beginners because we're only in our 2nd week of campus closure with all our learning happening online.
Awesome. And I see Christina next, so I'm going to call on Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Botville. I'm the curriculum director at the American International School in Kuwait. Like Liz, we are in our 2nd week of virtual school. Learning just last night, we will be adding another 2 weeks to our virtual school experience. And again, like we were talking before we started, very thankful for the schools in Vietnam and Asia, like Katrina's, who have blazed the trail for us. And we use a lot of their learning to inform how we're moving forward.
Awesome. And next on my screen, I see Rami and Charlotte, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, please.
Hello, I'm Rami, the head of ISKL, International School of Kuala Lumpur. Wonderful to see some familiar faces and some new faces on this recording. We are operating as normal. We have not yet closed. We are ready. We hope we are. And we have been on our toes for extended period of time, waiting for someone to tell us, close the school. Trying to stay open as long as possible and mitigate risks as they happen.
And I'm Charlotte Diller. I'm the Director of Technology. What I would add is that we've been learning from all of the schools who have already been closed and sort of updating our virtual learning plans and making sure that we are ready if we do end up going to a virtual environment.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to get James DL to introduce himself next.
Sure, thanks. My name is James DL. I will be the head at NIST in Bangkok starting in August, and I'm actually doing some consulting. So I am sitting here in beautiful downtown Bangkok as we speak right now. We are still in session, so we haven't gone out. We are all set. I think we're all set. As Rami said, we've got great plans, but what keeps going through my head is that Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get hit. And so we're waiting, we're ready, and we'll see what happens.
All right. And Beth, you're next on my list.
I'm Beth Dressler. I'm the primary principal and the deputy director at Dresden International School. And like NIST and ISKL, we're also waiting and we think we're ready. We've been preparing a lot of online learning and getting our systems set, getting our teachers ready, getting kids ready, parents ready, because the cases are increasing daily in Germany. So we feel for us it's just a matter of time. But I do want to give a shout out to everyone ahead of us in Asia that has it has helped us so much and has informed so much of our planning, decision making, and what we've been doing. I thank all of you so much for sharing work so freely with everyone over here in the far east of Germany and Europe.
Awesome. And last but not least, James Mack.
Hi, everyone. So good to see so many familiar faces there. I'm working with a not-for-profit foundation here in Dubai. It's called the Al Futtaim Foundation, and there's 2 schools under our umbrella right now. So an American curriculum with some IB and a British curriculum with some IB at the top end. We actually haven't officially closed yet, I guess you could say, because what the government said was that we are going to be on spring holiday for 2 weeks, which started on Sunday, and then we will go into distance learning for 2 weeks after that, and then we'll wait and see. So basically, schools are closed for a month, and they even said no people are allowed in schools for the first 2 weeks. But keep that a secret because I'm in one of the schools right now because we can do a Zoom call here without it being blocked. So, yeah.
So all of you are kind of in varying states of your preparation versus implementation. Whether you're in the preparation state or you're in the implementation state now, what is your thinking? What is your best advice for how schools can prepare for an extended school closure? Because I think even those of us that have been through school closures in the past, have any of them been like over 6 weeks with no end in sight? I mean, I think this might be one of the longest school closures that has been experienced on such a global scale. So would anyone like to start sharing a little bit about how they prepared for this extended school closure or how they are preparing and what kind of decision-making process you go through, including perhaps deciding how to decide?
Well, do you want me to start, Kim?
Go for it. You've got the longest experience.
Unfortunately,
yes.
So yes. So we in Vietnam, schools didn't resume after the Tet holiday, and the government made that decision. And so our school, we were notified on a Sunday that we would be closed for the following 2 weeks. And then we determined that we needed to run a virtual school, and we took the Monday morning off. And we spent the Monday morning planning, and we started virtual school on the Monday afternoon. And all along, during all of our process and procedure, the government has been very clear in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed, and that has helped us greatly. It took out a lot of the guesswork of when students would be allowed on campus or when they might not be allowed, and what was permissible and what was not. So that was an advantage. What was a disadvantage was that it happened suddenly, and then we were closed for 2 weeks, then we were extended another week, and it's been extended a week since then. So at this point in time, we are poised to think long term. And starting right off, that would be my first piece of advice. If you think your school will be closed, is to think long term and plan accordingly. because you get in the mindset of thinking long term, and it is definitely an advantage.
I think something that we thought about as in the lead up to knowing whether we would need to close, and then the clarification from the government, and that was distinguishing between school closure and campus closure. And so we made a really intentional choice to use the word campus closure, that our school is alive and well and functioning, and all of the things that go to do with being a school are still there in terms of teaching learning relationships, in terms of attending to our students, reaching out to our parents, finding ways to laugh together. It is only that the campus is closed. And so that distinction also helped when we were talking with our parents. And they were, because ours is only 2 weeks right now, and then we have spring break straight after, and wondering, do we just let's just go on holidays for a month? But making that distinction that the campus is closed, but learning is continuing, and the school as a community is moving from a physical campus to online. And so that was something that was, as we were listening to, again, as everybody said, listening to all of the schools in China and Asia who have had to go ahead of us, was really making that distinction between campus and school closure. The other thing that we were doing in terms of preparing is to play around with it, the tools that we would use with teachers, and initially kind of playing around in lighthearted ways, and then using it in terms of for meeting purposes and for learning purposes amongst faculty, so that when we went to use it with students, the tools would be familiar. And so there was lots of playing around and being a bit silly and seeing what goes wrong, and when you have all the microphones on at once, and how ridiculous can it get, doing all of that amongst us as faculty before doing it on a prolonged scale with kids.
Yeah, I'd say we did the same, and we've been taking the same advice and positioning ourselves, if we were to close, the same as a campus closure rather than the school closure. Yeah. And we're doing the same. Just now, when I was running around looking for a pair of headphones with a microphone, there was a MYP class doing the same and testing. They're working in Google Classroom, and they all had their headphones on. So we're in the midst of trying things out and figuring out what are some of those systems that we might need. How will we work within all of this? So we took the same advice. And I think, again, I'm grateful to everyone that's gone ahead of us in this case.
If we were back again, we would distinguish between virtual school and physical school. And the difference being it's all school, one is on the campus and one is not, and it's virtual. And that would have helped our parents to really distinguish between it, as you have mentioned. So you're very wise to think ahead to that right now.
Have any of you done test closures, like actual closures of the school? James, I'm setting you up for this, James D. Have any of your campuses done a trial where the kids don't come to school, and why, and how did that work, and what kind of advice would you have for that?
Sure. Well, with that preface, we did. So we had 2 days here at NIST that were trial days where students either stayed at home, some did come in, but it was all prearranged. It's like the fire drill you do where everyone knows that it's coming, so that it reduces stress, and it's actually a practice round, right? So, I think one of the things that we've learned from that, and from listening to the other people who've have already made suggestions as well, is the idea that during the online portion of school, for however long that looks, it's not going to look the same. Right. So preparing people we're going to adapt and learn throughout this process. And actually, the better we can get at very quickly learning from what works, upscaling that, dampen what doesn't work, make those changes. Right. And I think setting people up for this is going to be dynamic, even when we're in this setting, is an important piece to start with, so that staff know, so that teachers know this is going to be a changing environment too, and we're going to learn from each other, and we're going to make those changes quickly.
I can. Go ahead.
So we had the opportunity, I guess, to go to a virtual school during 2 days in September due to the haze. And so that was a practice for us. We got some feedback, and so we've been really looking at our virtual plans and so forth to make sure to see what we can do to strengthen our plans, along with the feedback that we've been getting from around the region. So it was an unintentional, unplanned practice.
Charlotte, I apologize, I'm asking you just totally out of the blue, but did you get feedback from how those virtual days went during the haze time? And like, what was the feedback that you received? And James, obviously you can jump in on this too. And I know Christina wants to share about their trial days as well. Did you get any feedback that this is what students appreciated, or this is what didn't work, or this is what did work? What kind of feedback did you hear?
Yeah, so we got feedback from certainly elementary, middle school, and high school teachers. We also got feedback from middle school and high school students, and some anecdotal parents across the board, and anecdotal students at elementary as well. And really what we found was that our expectations, some of our timing expectations, needed to be more clear. We found, what were some of the other things that we sort of were strengthening? In listening to some of the schools around the region and some of the feedback, also to have some sort of planning day or planning time. Don't start right from, oops, schools are closed today. Now you're running with it. Those were two. And a third was some of the engagement tools that teachers use that maybe they don't actually use, and maybe they do, in the classroom, Socratic seminars sort of thing online. That was something that we found was really successful with students. And so what kind of tools and training do we need to put in place to have that happen in a broader way?
I add there, Kim, so for schools that are anticipating this closure, and we should all anticipate it, audit what you have, because you really have to start with the tools that you have at your disposal. And then the tools that people are familiar with, their parents are familiar with, students are familiar with, and particularly teachers. And you have to start with the known, and then you can help upskill teachers. But it's very important to know what is currently working and what everybody is familiar with. Then that you have that certainty going into the closure situation.
So that kind of leads me to the next question, but I don't want to leave Christina, and I don't know if anyone else had something they wanted to share about that. My next question, and Christina, you can answer the old question first if you want, but my next question is going to be, what did you have in place that really worked well? Yeah. And what were the things you were like, oh, we need to pick up this piece? So I know, Christina, you wanted to say something about your closure, for your trial closure first.
Yeah. So thanks, Kim. Really, a lot of coincidences, if you believe in coincidences, kind of lined up in our favor. In November of 2019, we had 4 days of torrential rain that closed schools, and our director and our head of school said we need a virtual school procedure plan going forward, because if we have 4 days out, that's a significant loss of learning time. Well, as fate would have it, we had virtual school procedures in place that really were for a short closure, not a long closure. So now that's been adjusted. But in late January, about the time I think schools in China were closing, there was a little bit of posturing between Iran and the United States that kind of triggered us to revisit our virtual school procedures, to put some planning in place and some training opportunities for our staff. So we actually did a virtual professional learning, where one of our hour-long staff meetings that's always focused on professional learning, we actually set it up in a model of what a virtual lesson might look like, with a menu of like about a dozen different instructional videos that different staff members and tech coaches had created. And then teachers just moved through it themselves independently in their classroom or on a laptop in the library, whatever they chose, to learn more about it. The feedback was phenomenal. People, they really loved it. There were there were so many things in place that we know about learning and adult learning that we actually hit upon that made it really successful. So when we actually closed, when we learned we would have to close, a little bit like the context of China, we were out on about a week-long Liberation National holiday. And we knew during the holiday that when the holiday was over, we wouldn't be meeting back on campus. And it was really interesting because teachers said, did you guys know this was coming? And is that why we did and then because after that professional learning, I'll add, we followed it with 3 different days based on high school, middle school, and elementary school. We did simulations, but we did them face-to-face at school, thinking that would be an opportunity. Teachers created virtual type lessons. Students came to their classrooms as normal and proceeded to run through the lessons as if they were virtual in order to facilitate troubleshooting, to kind of get a feel for what kind of issues might students have logging in. All of that said, why this was really successful is we've had platforms in place for quite a few years now. We're an Office 365 school. We're using Teams, which conveniently is what a lot of China's using. Our elementary's on Seesaw, and we're really keeping people, our teachers and our students within those environments. And there's a lot of issues with going off platform, because that's another topic for another time probably, but the whole child safeguarding that comes into play in a virtual school setting.
So that's a super segue into the next kind of aspect of this question, which is, what did you have in place already that worked well, and what did you recognize either through actual closure or trial closure that you need to pay more attention to? And I don't think we have to stay targeted on just tools, because I know there's been a lot of conversation about mental health and socialization and well-being and just interacting with people in a visual way, even if you can't be there face to face. So would anyone like to share something that they feel like they really had in place that worked well, and then a recognition that, this is an area where we have an opportunity to improve?
Kim, I'll jump in because I feel like I should contribute here. It's really great hearing the conversation. I think we have yet to launch ours, but we were really fortunate in the sense that we've had time to practice, and we've had opportunities in advance of this closure happening, unlike many colleagues around the world. But I think one thing that's been very good, and to piggyback on what's been said, is there are the tools in place in all the schools. And in the past, when gone through situations like this, it's been less consistent. But now pretty much everyone knows how to use Google Classrooms or Microsoft Teams. We have Seesaw. This is it's part of the fabric of a school, like it wasn't 10 years ago. So those things are there and they're pretty seamless. But the one thing that struck me as a little bit surprising is when we are talking about e-learning, we're talking about essentially everything that happens in a bricks and mortar school happens virtually, but it can happen in different ways. And that idea of synchronized versus asynchronous. Yes. And there's a mindset shift that needs to happen. And that's been, I think, uneven with even our leaders, but certainly some of our educators, thinking that we need to replicate a timetable, right? The only way we will deliver a school is through a timetable. Well, not really. What's the learning? What are we trying to accomplish here? How can we go about something different? And frankly, a lot of the things that we're trying to do are exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the future of education. But it's a huge opportunity. But what hasn't gone so well so far, I would say, is trying to get sort of an even approach across the staff where we could approach and view e-learning as something that's really different and has amazing opportunities where we don't have to have everything synchronized like we would in a standard class where people come and go. And so that mind shift, that's going to come with time, but there is an opportunity to break some of that down.
That's such a good point about the synchronized versus asynchronous. And I think it's been really interesting to watch the schools in China. And I'm sure maybe it was similar for you, Katrina, too. When they went on break, people were everywhere, right? So yes. Most of the schools couldn't say, we have to be at school from this at school for this time to this time, because people were in the UK, people were in the US, people were in New Zealand. And then what time is fair to all of those people, as opposed to what's been happening. Sorry, I know a little bit because my husband works at NIST. What's been happening at NIST, where they're keeping with the school day, because the expectation is if school closes, we're all still here in Bangkok. We're not going to be all over the world. So just curious about the others, synchronous versus asynchronous, or anything that you had in place that worked really well, or what you discovered you needed to improve on.
We're actually doing both. We have about 15 staff who are outside of the country because of, again, we were on holiday. Some people chose to leave during the holiday when the closures were announced. So we have synchronous happening in our middle and high school, but we've also altered our schedule. It's only a 4-period day. So our 8 class periods happen over the space of 2 days. And having to make accommodations because there are teachers out of the country. There are families left. They sent their kids to Germany, enrolled them in school immediately. So there are different situations that we're taking into consideration, but there is still that expectation, because most everybody is in the country, that there is some instruction and connection happening in real time. Our elementary is asynchronous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'd say, we're planning for something similar. And for us, I think, for many of you too, we've got to work within German labor law and within the agreements that we have with, at our school, and then certainly as well within the law of what we have here. So we're anticipating the same, that everyone, if we do close, right, everyone is going to be here within Dresden. And we're trying to figure out what those hours would look like. We think for secondary, it would be synchronous, and then within primary, asynchronous. And that's also because for us, one of our issues within primary is we're not one-to-one. So we're a bit nervous about access to devices that kids might have at home, and how families at home will be able to support that. So we're yet to figure out what that's going to look like. In our middle and high, it's a one-to-one device school, so that we don't anticipate a problem with access to devices, but certainly within primary, it might be. So we're just trying to figure out what that will look like later.
Yeah. Oops. Go ahead, Rami.
I think a lot has been said that from the experienced colleagues here. I may add a perspective from ISKL, which is what triggers such decisions to close the school, and how do we prepare ourselves to it. We can close for 2 reasons. One is we are asked to close. The other is we choose to. And what helped us is to develop decision-making matrix that guides every scenario. And in all honesty, we all are impacted, whether we're open or not, with challenges. So we are still operating, but we get 80 to 100 emails a day from parents. Some of them say we should close and start operating virtually. So how do we manage this kind of the triggers to make a decision that is based on CDC? We follow the guidance from CDC, have been from the beginning in terms of what countries you travel to, or what type of contact you might have. For all these scenarios, what actions we take. What helped us, actually, just to go back to Kim's question, to prepare ourselves, we haven't tested it yet, as Jim said earlier. What helped us is to really look at not only the teachers, but other services. If the school were to close, what can the counselors do? What they cannot do? What resources do they need to do what they can do? And we looked at it from not only the teachers, from counselors, EAL, LR, business operation, HR, finance, all aspects of school. We haven't, again, tested it, but I think that perspective raised questions in our mind in terms of our readiness.
Yeah. I've used 3 terms when I'm describing our approach, and the easiest one is really the academic content. So the content, so my 3 C's, the content, we have, and our parents feel that we're delivering the content. So the other 2 are connection and communication. And I've been using systems that I already had in place, the connection with our PTA, using our PTA parents as our, a touchstone for our parent community and how they are responding and how they're feeling. It has been something I've always done. And just yesterday, we met with our PTA parents to ask them what were their communities, what were their concerns. And they weren't worried about the academic content. They were worried about the connection to the teacher. And they felt that we really had worked hard on connecting students with their teachers, but they're worried about the connection to other students and the social and emotional demands. So, Mary, every time you speak about well-being and wellness, that is really at this point in time, in the 6th week, where our parents' greatest concerns are, and where in anticipation of that, having mechanisms in place, using your counselors, as others have mentioned, having the connection vehicles, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, but having a way for every student to connect to an adult, and then ways for students to connect to each other in Google Meets or whatever it might be. That is, I think, proving to be the greatest challenge, and the most, and it really warrants thinking about now before schools are actually, before people are dispersed.
If I could jump in there on that too, just to kind of the idea that, like as Rami said, that stakeholder view of let's go through in detail who are all the stakeholders, who are all the people involved, what are the implications of these decisions for each, is the great planning that takes place on the detail level, so we know what the implications of some of those details are. But we also know that decision making in uncertain, fluid situations means we're never going to have all the details, right? It's that Rumsfeldian, what are the unknown unknowns? So we also know from other areas, like in the military, if you don't have all the information, you need to, instead of going into the details, you actually need to go up to the principles, right? What are the concepts, what are the conceptual overlays that we're going to use? And if it is content, connection, and communication, then that helps you make those decisions in time when you don't have all the details. What are our priorities? Well, we're going to focus on the content, we're going to stay connected, and we're going to communicate. And then that allows you to at least do something to move forward in a principled way. And I think that's another, and they talked about what are some of the leadership skills. I think being able to lead a community through those decisions and actually model that decision making in uncertain times using those kind of concepts that you can transfer is definitely something that we're all going to be, if not doing already, certainly doing in the future.
I think that approach influenced us in terms of our thinking for our teachers around differentiating what their goals were, because the learning that we were going to be creating and designing in an online experience is not going to exactly replicate, obviously, the learning face to face. Going back to what James was saying, that it's an opportunity to do something different, and so we differentiate and distinguish for our parents and for our teachers between, for example, in DP, especially, it is an issue for our grade 12s, feeling very time sensitive, feeling a powerful need for, to be on a distinct track and heading in a very distinct direction with a closeness of content to what they anticipated being maintained, so that they felt very, very secure. But then we were very clear that in other grade levels that we would take advantage of a different learning platform, and that conceptually we stay aligned to where the learning was already planned, and there may be some aspects of units that would continue as was planned, but that maybe this was an opportunity to attend to the concepts already planned in a different way. And so that was quite important, because it might be that the focus of the learning might shift, or the emphasis might shift from what parents might look at with a documented curriculum document, and they needed to feel secure with that was an intentional choice where we're staying true to the concept that the students are exploring, but perhaps tackling in a different way or from a different perspective, taking advantage of the change in our learning environment and the platforms we were using. And so that also released some stress for our teachers in terms of them thinking about how to plan for learning. One of the things same as everybody said, we continued using platforms our teachers are really comfortable with. We're a Google school, so all the G Suite really suited us well. Someone mentioned child protection. That's also good for us because you can log and you're aware of people are on or who's participating in which meet and so on. Things like that's very important, again, when we're thinking about our student safety. Something that we discovered, I think, Charlotte, you talked about before when you had your trial days, was around timing and pacing. And teachers recognizing or perhaps enthusiastically planning within the resources available and the different kind of stimulus materials and all the opportunities, but actually perhaps thinking about time and what was a reasonable learning session for an 11-year-old or a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old. And perhaps initially the planning was around the production. Oh, a learning session, I'm going to think about that, like how long it takes to produce something. And so we've just noticed wheeling that back. And well, a learning session is engaging with the stimulus material, processing it, and producing something. And that's helped or is helping because to frame how people design their learning stimulus and their learning expectations. And I think that's something we're still grappling with. That would be something that teachers are commenting on and kids are commenting on as well, about pacing.
So some big takeaways already. I'll just jump in and see if we can maybe kind of come to any other big takeaways. Learning opportunities that we notice through our various experience, whether it's a trial closure or an actual closure. Some things are learning time, pacing, scheduling, how that might be impacted by an online learning environment. It's just because it's a 40-minute class doesn't mean you have 40 minutes of content delivery, that timing of things. How we get together, leading the community through making these big decisions at that conceptual level, so we're not getting too bogged down in the details. Considering the connections among humans in this virtual space, the feeling connected to your teacher or the other students in your classroom, getting perspective on how the logistics of the days will work from all the perspectives of the community stakeholders and staff. Thinking about timing in terms of actually when class is going to happen, real time versus asynchronous. I think that's generally speaking, and I know I lumped some together. Are there any other big learnings or takeaways that you all feel would be worth sharing with people who are either just about to embark or maybe like reflecting on their experience, what they can consider? And I would like to just throw something in there about the aspect of missing out on school things. Like, what if schools are closed until the end of the semester and I miss my last basketball game, getting my yearbook, graduation, you know what I mean? All these pieces that are such a big part of a student's life. What if they miss all of that for a whole semester?
Okay, I might jump in. I think one thing trying to guide our thinking, and it's just been reinforced in the conversation today, is this notion that what week 1 looks like is different than what week 5 looks like. And that things that may work on day 1 simply will have diminishing returns.
True.
And also, I think something that's unique with this one, at least from my experience, having gone through March 11th, which we got to do together, and Japan with the earthquake, tsunami, and then of course NIST had a military coup. I was there. These were really sudden and quite emotional is too limiting a word, but it was the sort of situation where the entire community had to ask fundamentally on Maslow's hierarchy, are we safe? Whereas with this, it's such a slow and rolling kind of crisis, and you can see it coming, and we've been able to prepare for it in a slightly different way, notwithstanding the situations in China and Asia. But we have had sort of fair warning on this one. We've been able to get ready for it. But it looks like a more stressful thing over the long term in terms of the well-being, because there's no closure to it, and there's isolation, and people are looking for connection versus content and all of this. And so it's uncharted territory. And as you said, you know, when you miss your graduation, and my daughter is about to graduate this year, and this has been a conversation at home, I'm not quite sure what to say to her, because she, you know, if this keeps rolling the way it's rolling, I mean, how terrible is that? And I'm not quite sure how to handle it as a dad or as a school leader and all of these things, but this is new psychological territory.
I mean, it even makes me think, are school leaders considering doing, and I have no idea how the logistics of this would even work. I know that teams can have virtual events up to something like 1,000 people, Sandra Chow said in our recent teachers call like this. Are you thinking about having virtual social events, virtual get-togethers? I know a couple of schools are doing like coffee meetings with teachers where at a certain time every day you can just go to the Zoom room and just hang out for a little while, or whatever tool that you use, hang out for a little while to see other people and be able to like just connect with your colleagues on a personal level.
So ISKL is part of a network of 6 schools in the region, and we had to cancel our events, IASOS. But some of them we've done it virtually, the music convention, the dance, the debates, the forensics, we have done them virtually. It's not the same. It's a new learning experience for our students not to have real audience and real teams, but it seemed better than not to offer that.
Yes. And I was really impressed with our high school students. One of their favorite activities this time of the year is the SSIS Idol. So they perform and then there's a competition. And they said, this is important to us. We're going to organize SSIS Idol and we're going to do it virtually. And here's what it's going to look like. We know we have the tools. It's going to be competition. And I think our students can really help us to get our heads around that, because for them, it is very much their world. And they really are comfortable in a virtual world in situations like that. And I think we can really call upon them and harness their strengths and their skills and really get their opinions and get them involved. And if there is one thing I have learned going through this is really speak to people, listen to people, seek feedback, seek input, and because this is a community challenge. The school does not have all the answers. We need to work on this as a community, and to do that, we need to be listening and we need to be responding. And I was very impressed that our students, they were ahead of us in that thinking, and because it's important. And I'm sure they'll have some creative solutions for how we approach our graduation as well. Prom is a different matter. We mightn't have a solution to that one, but I think we need to listen to our students greatly.
Kim, you mentioned earlier, you summarized it so well, and you mentioned if there is something else. If I may add an idea, for schools who are not yet closed, we all know the last thing you want is to close. So if you are told to close, you have no choice. The only choice we have to remain safely open is to really manage the safety of everyone that comes on campus. And I think what we have learned, the good things is the crisis response team to be clear and to base decisions on facts. But the area that we need to get better at now, especially with the number of COVID positive people that are spreading, is informing, the 450 staff and teachers we have. Really, if you are in close contact with someone who came from level 3 or someone who tested positive, you really should be quarantining yourself. You should not come. Yeah. We had 2 incidents. One, it's over with. The second, we are still awaiting results. I think by the time this is announced, this video is published, we will know the outcome. But that may trigger our virtual learning, and that's not something we like to do.
And I think many of us are in the situation that spring break is just around the corner, whether it's on right now for Dubai schools because of the change, or it's coming in the next couple of weeks. Even that, considering, what is your travel going to be, and then what happens when people come back from travel and how that all works is very stressful and challenging, right?
Very stressful.
Yeah, I think that's a very common question among staff is what does the calendar now look like for the rest of the year? Does this impact spring break? Does it impact when we end? We go into Ramadan kind of mid-April, right? Like mid-April, late April. And those were some of the decisions that were made today in our admin meeting. This is airing next week. Moving spring break up earlier because it will be after 4 weeks of virtual school, giving everybody a break. And the idea too, but like many of us have already planned our break that's supposed to happen April 9th, hoping that the airlines and the hotels come through on all those full refunds, and knowing that, I forgot what I was going to say, knowing that we're really probably not going anywhere for spring break anyhow, because we could leave and be stuck outside of the country, or have to return to the country, quarantine ourselves, self-quarantine for 14 days, but then not be able to actually report to school maybe if we need to report back to campus. So there's a lot of sticky situations, right?
Very difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's a great reminder that teachers are human. That's a good thing to remember. And like James said too, we're always thinking in terms of Maslow, and we're asking people to maintain their professionalism and continue to teach students. And I think it's important that we acknowledge and recognize, and you're trying to struggle with, what am I doing for the June-July holiday? When do I have to get back? Am I going to lose all my tickets? What happens to my dog if they get stuck in Venezuela? Whatever that looks like, those are real things that we need to acknowledge, even if we can't solve them. Just the sense of saying, I know that we're all thinking about these things on a personal level, and know that the school will do what they can to support you and will communicate as soon as we know anything. And again, we know that we're going to work on certain principles, like we're going to keep people safe. We're going to do what's right for the overall, slowing up the transmission of this. We're going to learn. So I think those are the things that we can do to help, even if it's not solving the problem. At least it's acknowledging, and what that might look like to remain flexible now too.
And I think that flexibility and that the communicating, and then the clarity that comes with that. So, for example, you, James and Rami before mentioned, thinking about all the stakeholders, all the members of the school community, and having a crisis response team, we have a pandemic matrix here. So before the campus was closed, we were aware of what level are we at in our own internal processes, and teachers know that we have that, the community knows that we have that. And then what external guidelines do we follow? So we follow Kanagawa Prefecture, we follow Japanese government, we follow the CDC. And so that means that as people are trying to make their own plans, they can access the same information that the decision makers are accessing in order to make a decision. And so that creates a further sense of transparency, clarity, and at least a sense of, all right, what was the context where that decision came from? And I think that helps a little bit to reassure. It can't fully do it. It still can't fully do it because people are juggling so many different, conflicting emotions about their feeling about responsibility to their own family, responsibility to their students. But identifying the sources of information and the process by which decisions are made using that information has been helpful.
One of the things that I learned was that we were communicating so much with our parents, with students, of course, but with our parents and with our faculty and staff, that after a couple of weeks, I had somebody say, we really miss hearing from you in person. So I started doing videos. And the feedback was that it was very reassuring because you can speak to them as humans, as people, and they can hear your voice in addition to hearing what you have to say. So that's one of the things, and I'm not good at doing video. It was not my strength, and totally out of my comfort zone. And even admitting that was helpful for teachers because they're all out of their comfort zones. But that direct connection, it's the personal connections that are really going to help us get through this crisis. And that helps.
We've used virtual morning briefings with everybody in together, and it's really, you're right. There's a lot of laughter that then when people go off to their day that may be individual and alone, because not all of our teachers are living, in family situations. Many of our teachers may be living independently, maybe in Japan independently, and so how do we break up that sense of isolation for our teaching community as much as for our students? And so we kind of, we're lucky because we're still in the same time zone together, is to have that a virtual briefing together, and everybody kind of chips in and has a good laugh at where we are and who's got pets and who has children running across the background, and it lightens it and attends to the human nature of it as well as the professional nature.
Great. Listening to all of your comments, I think a big kind of overarching theme or takeaway that I'm getting from all of this is consistent with what we've been hearing from the teachers and the parents that we've been talking to too, is that we have to look at this as a long-term process where communication and connection are so key. The communication where the decisions are coming from and why we're prioritizing different aspects, but then that personal side of when you're delivering that communication can't be exclusively emails for 6 weeks, right? That idea of having that personal face-to-face connection, whether it's from you as a head of school or from the teacher to their class or from students to each other, bringing that personal piece in for such a long-term closure is something that school leaders as well as teachers need to be really thinking about, especially those that haven't started yet, because that is an uncomfortable space for a lot of educators, right? Not everybody's comfortable being on video. And so just getting ready for it, bracing yourself now, because that's going to be key, I think is a really nice takeaway and kind of way to end this conversation, because I know your time is valuable and we've all been together for an hour already. Is there anything else that you really wanted to make sure we got into this conversation right now at this moment?
I just want to say one thing, Kim, and I want to thank you for actually pulling this together and putting all of us, in this call together. Yeah, on the spot, because I think, exactly, someone said earlier, we have to model what we're trying to do, and we want to model those ways of communicating with people and the connection with people. And I think this has been a stellar example of that. And for someone, again, we're watching from afar in Europe, but it's spreading rapidly and quickly here for us. And I think for me, I take a lot of comfort in knowing that there are colleagues, all of you out there around the world, we're all doing the same thing. I made some notes going through the things that we've been talking about in our leadership team is everything that you've mentioned. So for me, it also feels, okay, yeah, we're on the right path and we're on the right track. And I think that connection right now and that communication has been really important. So thanks, Kim, for pulling us all together. I appreciate it.
Thank you, all of you, so much for your time. My pleasure so much. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you,
Kim. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, you too. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. There was so much to discuss with these school leaders. I hope that we can come back and have a follow-up conversation in the future to see where things develop. Keep your eye on our emergency school closure page, which I will put in the video and in the show notes right here for you, because we'll keep updating that with extended resources as we curate, collate, and develop them for you. And if you're looking for more coaching resources, please check out our website at COACHBETTER.tv. That's where you can find all the transcripts and show notes from all these conversations as well. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Coach Better. See you next week.